Now, here's the host of Good as Gold, Nick Grovich.
Hi, welcome to the show. Carl Ladas filling in for Nick Grovich. Just want to give you a couple of quick market updates today. If some of you gold bugs are out there watching the market, we're actually down 2140 right now, down to the 1050 mark. Had a little increase yesterday of a few dollars, $10 or $15 worth, and probably because of the announcement of the interest rate hike of 0.25% by the Fed. We thought that the market already kind of knew that was going to happen and had taken that into account, and turns out we were right because it's given it all back today, down 2140 like I said. Silver's currently trading at $13.69, platinum $8.41. We still love platinum. I was told by a good friend of mine in the office, Brian, pump platinum, baby, pump platinum. We think we're just really behind that metal, and availability seems to be fine right now. Looks like probably Canadian Maple Leafs are live, and we can get our hands on some Pamp Swiss bars. They'll be probably delayed delivery for just about a week or two, but very, very well priced in the market today. I have a couple of good friends of ours with us today. They were on a show with me a couple weeks ago. I've got Cory Frampton and Kent Ponterio from World Numismatics. We're going to have some little interesting conversation later on. Just wanted to welcome you guys to the show, and thanks a lot for showing up.
Hello, everybody. Thanks.
Yep, thanks for having us.
So, Kent, what's going on in the European market? I know you're pretty much our resource on things over there.
Yeah, I'm traveling overseas quite a few times each year, with the goal of buying things over there and importing them here. And one of the big things that is the topic of much discussion is things coming out of the Middle East, and namely Syria, and trade restrictions on the U.S. importing that stuff. I was at a show in San Francisco last weekend where there was a PowerPoint presentation and a debate about this stuff. And, the debate is, are these coins from Syria being looted out of sites, and is it funding terrorism? Is ISIS putting these things on the market, and is that where the money's going? And there's a couple different sides of that debate. Some people say yes, definitely that's where it's coming from. Some people say no. A lot of it's, Syrian refugees that are bringing something that's portable with them that they can sell when they get to wherever they're going. So it's kind of a heated thing in my field, in the foreign and ancient field. And, it's not really something new. This has kind of always been the case. Like during the Vietnam War, when you had Vietnamese refugees coming into this country, there were huge processing centers at military bases like Camp Pendleton, where you actually had gold buyers and numismatists set up there buying directly from the refugees. Now,
there's a new law enacted about foreign imports just recently, wasn't there?
Well, you right now you cannot import items of Syrian origin, like earlier numismatic items of Syrian origin.
Okay. That brings up an argument, because a lot of your astute archaeologists or ancient artifact type guys, stuff like that, are concerned about that, because you've got all these ancient Syrian artifacts and everything from that era of the world. They're not allowed to come into the United States, so they're kind of filtering into Europe, aren't they? England, places like that.
I mean, imposing an import restriction doesn't solve the problem.
Just moves it somewhere else.
It just moves it somewhere else. It's like when the U.S. put a ban on the importation of ivory. It didn't stop people from going out and slaughtering elephants with AK-47s.
Right.
It just made the market go somewhere else. It went to Asia or wherever.
Right. So the law, I wonder if the law was strictly to try to curtail ISIS from making money on selling artifacts, do you think? Or
it's a couple things. I mean, that's part of it, and part of it is an attempt to prevent looting. I mean, similar laws were put into effect during the Iraq and Afghanistan war, where there was a big fear that a lot of things had been looted out of the museums in Afghanistan, and they imposed trade restrictions on this stuff. And thankfully, I know at least with the big fear of coins with Afghanistan, some of the curators went and actually put that stuff down in the basement and hid it. So it was some of the larger objects that were taken out of the museum statues and things like that.
As a practical matter, though, the materials being looted either way is just where the destination is, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And then those that are too big to be looted, it seems like, are being destroyed.
That's the really sad thing, is that you could you could go on YouTube right now and type in something like ISIS destroying cultural heritage sites, and like the city of Palmyra, there was a Roman arch there that they just strapped 50-gallon drums to it and blew the thing up and blew up a bunch of these, Roman pillars and temples and things like that. And there's videos of them just taking jackhammers and bulldozers and just wiping these sites off the face of the earth.
So pretty much anything that's not Islam is they're trying to cleanse from the earth.
Yeah, it's not Islam, but I mean, these are cultures that people haven't worshipped those gods in thousands of years, and it's. Yeah. I think it's more of making a statement than it is, any kind of practical application to it.
Yeah, I was reading an article about the temple in Palmyra where they had tortured the head of antiquities there, and they were trying to find out where, obviously, smaller items were that they had hidden prior to ISIS coming in, or ISIL, I don't know what the heck you call it nowadays. But they tortured the poor guy for almost 30 days, and then they finally killed him.
They hung the curator at one of the museums there, and I mean, and that's just people being like, look, this is not okay. This is a World Heritage Site. This is something that needs to be preserved for mankind, and you speak out about it, and they kill you.
We were talking about Russia when the czars fell, when the communism went into Russia. What was it? They didn't destroy artwork.
No. Russia was a different deal. Like if about 10 years ago, I was at the Hermitage, and we were laughing about like how blatant they are about where they acquired a lot of their famous paintings and things, and it's all like 1917, 1918, 1919, up to about the early 20s. It's all right after the Russian Revolution, and they'll have little placards on the wall next to a painting that it's from the Sir So-and-so collection or the Madame blah 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 collection. And the Russian take on it was more that this is art, it should belong to everyone, and it wasn't about destroying it or it was about confiscating it, but it wasn't about destroying it. It was about this should belong to the people, not that it shouldn't exist.
So it's preserved, not destroyed. Yeah, that just disgusts me, to be honest with you.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it is. It is. Looks like we're going to be coming up on a break. We got a few more seconds here. So basically, you got ISIS running around the Middle East, not only killing hundreds of thousands of people, but they're trying to destroy humanity or anything that's non-Muslim.
Yeah, pretty much so.
To keep it real short and simple, huh?
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on a break. We'll be right back. If you have any questions, you can call our office at 800-221-7694. We'll get caught up with the boys from World Numismatics and get you their contact info coming up.
Once again, here's Nick Grovich.
Hi, Carl Ladas filling in for Nick Grovich. I'm here with the boys from World Numismatics, Cory Frampton and Kent Ponterio. Over the break, we were talking about the refugee situation and what's happening over there in Europe. You've got kind of a first-hand account over there, don't you, Kent? And you know a lot of people you grew up with a lot of those guys over there, too, so you kind of have a different perspective than...
Yeah, I mean, as we talked a couple of weeks ago, I did a 3-week stint over in Europe where I started out in the UK, went to France, went to Germany, the Netherlands, back to Germany, and then to Switzerland. And it was kind of interesting because every time you went out to dinner with somebody and, we'd start out talking coins, but it always, towards the end of the meal, it always went to where we were talking about like the refugee situation. And it was really interesting to listen to different people's takes on it and how it's affecting Europe. For instance, a dealer that I know in Spain, he was talking about the refugees that were coming over in Spain, and he goes, Kent, they're not even Syrian. They're mostly Moroccan coming across from North Africa. They all speak French and Arabic. So what he told me they did in Spain, they've set up these roads with signs in French and signs in Arabic directing them on how to get to France because they don't want them in Spain. So, because, Spain's coming out of this, they're still in a huge recession where they've got 20% unemployment, which is down. I mean, they had 25% last year, and most of that unemployment is working age men, which is what most of the refugees are. So the Spanish were they're like, yeah, we just have a highway set up for them.
Yeah, there's no jobs here.
There's no jobs here. Move along. These are not the droids you're looking for.
Yeah, that's
kind
pretty
of
funny.
Kind of just move along, and It was interesting. Most of the people that I talked to about this it was mostly younger, between your age of your mid-20s up to about maybe late 40s. And most everybody agreed that, yeah, it's just a bad situation and we're really not sure what to do about it. And the one group of people that had a different outtake on it is most of the young German dealers that I talked to were like, no, we welcome these people. This is a bad situation. And it just kind of threw me for a loop, because whereas most of the other countries were like, no, this is bad and it's going to mess up our country. The young Germans had a total different outtake on it. And, when you watch those videos on the news, that's where most of the refugees, where are you going? We're going to Germany.
Yeah. I wonder if that's because they all kind of started out in Spain and France and over there earlier, and you kind of have a longer history of what's happened.
Well, Germany historically has a history of, they've got a large Turkish population there, and they have for a long time, and they've kind of integrated, and maybe that's the idea behind it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, interesting, real interesting. Well, what do we talk about next? We got lots of goodies happening around the world. How about the rare coin market? How's all this stuff going to affect the rare coin market, in your opinion, when it comes to ancient, or not just ancient, but just world coins in general?
In my opinion, I'm a big fan of keeping the coins in America, keeping value in America. And I think as time goes on and it gets harder and harder to import things into the U.S., that the things that are here and they're here to stay, as long as we keep them in this country, will go up in value. That's my take on it. And, historically, when the euro was stronger, the pound was stronger, the foreign coin dealers would come here and they were taking the best of the best and taking it back to the home countries.
Right.
Because of the shift in currency, it's starting to come the other way, where we're able to buy from these countries and bring it here. Predominantly countries like Portugal, like more big Portuguese collections have come on the market in the last few years than I'd seen in the last decade. And you can actually buy rare Portuguese coins cheaper now than you could, 5 or 10 years ago. Same goes with Italy, same goes with Spain. A lot of these countries you hear about that are what's dragging the euro down, the coin side of it, you're actually able to buy stuff.
Yeah, that's part of what's driving gold down, folks. The dollar hit a 3-week high today. How about Cuba? With that opening up, what's that gonna do to the coin market? I know
that's an interesting one. We just opened up the embassy here, the Cuban embassy here, and the one in Cuba as well, and kind of remending that bond. I think legally right now you're not able to import things that are of Cuban manufacture, that are Cuban. And some weird things fall into that, like a Cuban 20 peso gold coin, which was actually minted by the U.S. Mint and then shipped there. You technically can't import it because it's Cuban, even though it's the same. Yeah, it's the same planchet as a U.S. $20 gold piece, and But that's an interesting one. I think that you're going to have two markets when Cuba opens up, at least coin-wise. I think you will have a genuine collector group developed that's buying the coins, and you're going to have a speculator group. You're going to have people that are like, wow, Cuban's going to be the next hot thing. It's going to be like when China opened up or when Russia opened up, but on a smaller scale. So I think there will be a big buzz at the beginning. I think the prices will spike. They'll probably level off, but it's going to be at a higher level than what it is now. And I know of a couple collectors already that are already kind of anticipating this and have started putting away, like, top pop Cuban gold, things like that, because there's not a lot of it. There's only a couple dates. It's not a big series. So if you like the coins and you're a believer in that, I mean, it's
there's a very healthy market in Cuban collectible gold and that sort of thing now, with the refugees that came in the 60s and that acquired wealth over the years. But I would think that market's going to take off quite a bit further. If you were going to speculate in it, it'd be a good time to do it now.
Right now the market is predominantly, second and third generation Cuban Americans. I mean, if you went and set up at a show in Florida, which is where there's a huge population,
Sure.
like the Fun Show
Fun
or
Show,
something like
yeah.
that, and you brought decent Cuban coins with you, you'd have a good show.
I'll be curious to see what that looks like here in a couple of weeks. The show calendar upcoming here in the next month is going to be really interesting in that respect. The Fun Show in Florida.
There's a big one in New York too at the same time.
Yeah, we're actually dividing up the company. Cory's going to
Divide
be
and
going
conquer.
down to Florida, and I'll be in New York for the auction circuit and the show there.
Oh, great. Sounds like fun stuff. We've got same stuff going on in our side of the world. You know, we've really seen some really neat, exceptional rarities come into play here just recently. And, you know, we're just in two separate markets. The U.S. market, unfortunately, it's I'm not going to say it's been played out, but there's some really rare coins out there. The problem is you just have a limited pot of exceptional, you know, collectors in the U.S. market. We don't have the numbers of the types of guys that can afford a $100,000 coin or, you know, an exceptional rarity that we used to have. That coupled with there's just been some really huge, they're not finds, they're actually just huge collections that are just coming to bear in the last couple of years that haven't seen the light of day.
In the U.S. market, I mean,
Yeah.
several of the top collectors have sold, like Newman, Pogue.
Yeah.
And you take the top out of the market and, you know.
It hurts. Then coupled with this, we were talking about the Central America shipwreck earlier. You know, shipwrecks can be good, they can be bad. It just depends on what's on it and how much is on it. Wasn't there was a speaking of world coins, there was a shipwreck, was it off of Spain or
Off the coast of the one that they're, off the coast of Colombia.
It's down south. Okay, Colombia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a shipwreck from that went down in the early 1700s. From a numismatic perspective, there's just not the time period doesn't fit the time period of when there was some exceptional coins.
Of course, the government of Colombia is saying that it's the most important shipwreck ever found, which is that. Frankly, that's kind of what everyone says whenever a shipwreck is found, like it's the greatest discovery ever.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, from a numismatic perspective, if it's early 1700s, then it's all cob coinage or silver bars or gold bars. And they didn't start striking large format gold coins in Colombia until 1743. So it's all going to be 2 escudo size and smaller. So it'll be small size cobs or doubloons.
And a cob is a coin that's basically smacked on an anvil with a hammer and a
yeah, cob's an
and a die.
Cob's an interesting term. It's debatable why a coin of that era is called a cob, but what they believe is that it's Cabo de Barra, and in Spanish colonial America, they would take a silver bar and they would hammer it down and then cut the planchet off of the side of a bar to make what was a cob, Cabo de Barra. And then they'd put little adjustment cuts. When they get it to the right weight, they just smack it with 2 dies and a hammer and an anvil, just like you said. And that's kind of, you know, if you grew up watching the Goonies or something like that, the pirate treasure,
that's cool.
That's the kind of coin you're talking about. That's more than likely what's going to be on that shipwreck, even though they haven't salvaged it yet or haven't gone down and brought up samples. That's, for the time period, that's the type of thing that should be on it.
Interesting. We were also talking about this, back to the Central America shipwreck. They discovered it, I don't know, 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago.
Something like that.
And they had a big promo and a big release and a bunch of 1857 San Francisco Mint 20s and all kinds of different neat stuff on there. Well, they're bringing up they've already brought up a lot more gold because the technology didn't exist the first go around. That supposedly they came up with a better technology, little submarines, unmanned stuff. They go down and
that wreck is so deep that you can't scuba dive it. It has to be done with submersibles.
Yeah. Well, what I've noticed, and the guys in the office, Don in the office, we noticed the populations on a lot of the 57S20s in different grades have more than doubled all of a sudden. And where did all those coins come from? The Central America. So a lot of times when we hear big shipwreck, the first thing that goes through our mind is, oh Lord, how many coins did they find?
Right.
So looks like we're coming up on a break. We'll be back with Kent and Cory, and we'll talk a little bit more. Thank you.
Once again, here's Nick Grovich.
Hi, Carl Ladas filling in for Nick today, here with the boys from World Numismatics, Kent and Cory. Over the break, we were talking about, you guys just picked up 1,008 reals.
Yeah, a while back, we picked up a group of 1,000 colonial Mexican 8 reals that one of our colleagues brought out of Haiti. And it's kind of interesting because at that time, Haiti didn't have its own coinage. So usually what you'll find in colonial era is Mexican coins and foreign coins, occasionally French coins. It was a French colony. And what happened was, is this farmer's out plowing his field, and he hits this clay vessel with his hoe, and in it are 1,008 reals, and, why are they there? And, Haiti was the first country after us. They were the second country in the New World to gain their independence after we gained ours. And it was a very different situation than what we had. Theirs was more of a slave rebellion, where the majority of the population on the island was black slaves that were there working the sugar plantations and stuff like that, and they revolted against the French and gained their independence. And when they did it, they burnt down a lot of the plantations. So a lot of these wealthy plantation owners, you could find a field that, wow, there's a
urn full of
coins sitting there. Yeah.
Interesting.
And if you remember, it was after they gained their independence. I mean, Haiti, you don't think of it now because it's such a poverty place, but they played a big role in helping places like Bolivia and Venezuela gain their independence.
Yeah.
If you remember when the earthquake happened there, and the president of Haiti made a statement, he goes, "Latin America, we were there when you needed us. Now it's your turn to help us out." And what he's referring to is that in South America, when Simon Bolivar was, trying to gain independence down there, he was getting just his butt kicked by the Spanish.
Yeah.
And he went to the president of Haiti, and the president of Haiti told him, he said, "Look, I'll give you all the guns, ships, troops that you need, but when you go down to South America, you need to free all the slaves." And what he did was he did exactly that, and then a lot of the slaves wound up siding with him, and then he mopped up the Spanish.
Kicked them out of there.
Yeah, but places like that, you find hordes of coins like that, because there was conflict there. People don't put their money in the bank. They, what do? You bury it in the ground, you hide it, and if that person winds up dying or something like that, the coins just sit there and wait to be found.
That's part of the reason. That's one of the reasons I love coins so much. There's a story, not always just about the coin and the era that it was minted in and why it was minted, but there's always a story on how they're discovered as well.
Yeah.
I mean, what you were telling me about the mules down in the mule train horde.
Oh, down in Ponterio, Bolivia. Yeah. That's an interesting. They've got that huge mountain down there that they've been pulling silver out of it for forever. And I mean, it's such a big mine that there's actually mules that are born underground that work the mines that have never seen the light of day.
Wow.
That they're, like subterranean donkeys that are working the mines down there. But so during the colonial times, they used to trek that stuff across the peninsula to the east coast to load it onto ships to ship it back to Spain. And, they're hiking up through the mountains on these giant cliffs. And about 15 years ago, there was a horde that was called the Mule Train Horde, and it was all 1629 Potosi 8 reals. And they called it the Mule Train Horde because it was found down at the bottom of one of those gorges. And
some poor mule.
Some poor mule that lost its footing and just went down there with fell down a cliff and died with a bunch of freshly minted coins. And all the guys in the mule train are like, "Well, I'm not going down after it."
Yeah. That's another. Speaking of freshly minted coins, it just amazes me that you can find coins that are, 500, 1,000, 2,000 year old, sometimes more, that are in, basically uncirculated or close to uncirculated condition, which means it's a new coin. I mean, it just amazes me.
It all depends on exposure. I mean, gold is a fairly inert metal, so you can, like, those shipwrecks off the coast of Florida, you can pull up coins that are mint state that, as long as they're not sloshing around in the sand and getting
from abrasion,
what we call sand washed, then they're going to be mint state coins. And you could have ancient Roman coins that are mint state that, because it's inert, and it just depends on how they were stored. And with ancient coins, there's a lot of coins that are surprisingly common.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think that, but I mean, there's coins that there's thousands and maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of in the world.
Give the listeners an idea of what's common in an ancient gold coin today that's reasonably priced close to Unk.
Oh, I mean,
history.
You could pick up soliduses that are minted or solidi that are minted during the Byzantine Empire in mint state, like not even close to mint state, but definitely mint state for, $700-800 or less.
It's just amazing that the material survived in any kind of quantity. But as you said, there's no banks. What do they do with it? Bury it.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, say your city's being besieged or something like that. You hide it, and And, you know, if
Hope for the best.
if your city gets sacked and the coins are sitting there, the coins are buried, or, you know, historically when two armies would go into battle, they'd carry their payroll with them. And before the battle, they'd probably hide the payroll somewhere. And if that army lost, an entire army's payroll is just sitting in the ground.
Speaking of that kind of thing, Kent, in the office the other day, we were talking about the siege money that came out of that French.
Oh.
Yeah, tell them.
Oh, so I bought this. It's for the siege of Landau, which is it's a city that in the early 1700s traded hands from French to German and back and forth. And both the French and the Germans struck this necessity coin during the siege. So when I was in Paris, I bought the French version of it, and it struck in 1706, and it's made out of part of the French magistrate silver plateware. And they just basically cut the plate into strips, and then when they were the right weight, stamped them, and it still has the edge of the plate on it.
Oh, really?
And part of the pattern of his plateware on the back. It's this total necessity coin that it's really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's funny that that they make coins out of. I mean, you got the original chain set in the United States was made out of what? Cannon barrel copper. It was a copper that held the gunpowder barrels together.
Yeah, or the Disney was made out of Martha Washington silverware.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know what they say. I mean, necessity is the mother of invention.
That's
and
right.
you know, if your city's under siege and you need to pay your troops, I mean, they're not going to fight for free.
No, they're not.
And one of the very first, some of the very first issues of paper money came from that.
Yeah.
The same sort of thing in Mexico, Texas. It was the first in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, fascinating. So for you folks out there that aren't collectors, you're kind of getting a little insight into the collector world about the history and all the stories, and it's kind of neat. As a coin collector, you can almost become a storyteller.
Yeah, a little bit.
Kent.
Sorry, I mean that's.
No, it's wonderful. We just love hearing it. I hope our listeners are loving it. I
More
love
on the
it.
historical content.
That's all right.
Yeah.
No, it's great. Well, you guys found a 8 real recently, didn't you? A pretty rare pattern. Was it an 8 real?
Yeah, we're actually sending it off to grading today.
Oh.
It's so in Mexico you have different mints. Mexico City being like their main mint, and then you've got Durango, Alamos, Hermosillo. There's about 13 or 14 different mints that sprung up over the years, and we recently bought a pattern for the Alamos mint, which there are no patterns known for that mint, and it's the first year struck in silver, and it's struck from dies that were designed by a famous metallist in the UK named William Wyan, and the hubs for these were used on 8 reals of other mints, Hermosillo and Guanajuato, but for Alamos it was totally unknown.
So that's how they were able to track it and make sure it's an original coin. Yeah,
original coin.
very
It has all the
interesting.
same diagnostics as the Alamos and Hermosillo piece, or the Guanajuato and Hermosillo piece.
Well, that's got to be a pretty exciting piece you guys came across. Probably haven't seen something like that in a while.
It's kind of the equivalent. If it was a U.S. coin, it'd be like finding a first-year pattern for Carson City dollar or something like that. But it's
and only one.
Yeah, and only one. Yeah, exactly.
In existence.
And it's always really interesting where these things turn up. Never where you
tell
expect.
us about the guy you bought it from. Where
We
did
bought
he
it
come
from
about it?
we bought it from a European dealer, and he bought it in Europe, and which makes a lot of sense because the mints in Mexico in the 1800s were basically leased to companies, and a lot of times it would be a German or an English firm that would lease these mints, and that's probably why it probably went back there with some European that was either working at the mint or an official in the mint. And the quality of it's not the greatest. I mean, it's only like a VF to EF coin. It's circulated, which is unusual for a pattern. But immediately it made me think, you know what, this was probably the pocket piece that somebody carried with them that was like some mint worker, that carried it as a memento,
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah.
That's
neat to see that things like that are unknown can still show up.
It is. Now every time I hear about, this happened, how many years ago was that?
That was 1864 when that coin was made.
Talk about a small world. I mean, even back then, now it's really small with the advent of electronics and, communication and all that other stuff we have. But even back then, it just amazes me that this stuff was moving across the oceans of the world all the time.
Oh yeah, there's a
And
very, very rare, an 1835 Hermosillo mint 8 real of Mexico that was only known from this book called Riddell. That's the monograph of a silver dollar, and Riddell was working at the New Orleans Mint. So he documented all the foreign coins that were circulating in New Orleans so that merchants knew what to take them in and trade. And he had a line drawing of one in there. No one had ever seen one. And about 6 years ago, one turned up in Paris. Like,
really?
yeah. It was only known from this old 1800s
Old book.
line drawing. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that stuff's really cool. Really cool. I don't have anything that good to talk about, guys. I'm sorry.
At that point in time, Mexico was the biggest. They mined more silver than everybody else
yeah.
on the planet combined, and it was the way they exported it was to turn it into coinage, and it became China's coinage. Much of the
Everywhere, Africa, Europe. I mean, it totally changed the world economy at that time.
all Mexican silver. Interesting. Well, looks like we're coming up on a break. Maybe not for a few more seconds here. Oh, here we go. There's the music. This radio stuff's not that easy, folks. It is when you have good guests like I do today. But anyway, Cory, what's your phone number over there in case anybody wants to reach you guys?
480-921-2562, worldnumismatics.com if you want to take a look at the company.
We'll see you after the break.
Once again, here's Nick Grovich.
Hi, Carl Ladas filling in for Nick, here with Kent Ponterio and Cory Frampton of World Numismatics. We were just talking, if we only had some beer, we could probably get into some really good conversations. Anyway, Kent, tell us a little bit about some of the crazy stuff you've bought and sold over the years.
Tell them about Flintstone money.
Oh. I'll never hear the end of that, but so the largest coin ever produced in the world, it's not the largest struck coin, but the largest currency ever produced is from Yap Island in Micronesia. And this is an island where they have no natural source of stone, so what the natives used to do is they'd take these canoes and they would ferry to Palau, and they would quarry this stone, and they basically look like giant rock donuts or a wheel from the Flintstones. And because they had no source,
Like how big? Like the size of a paper plate? Like
they
the
could
size
be
of a wagon wheel?
anywhere from a few inches to, I believe the Bank of Canada has one that weighs a couple metric tons.
So the
And
last
it's
one we sold was what, 40
About
pounds?
40 pounds, yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to know how much they are in mint state?
So no, it's an interesting story because it's
Do they come in a PCGS holder?
no. We could Photoshop that though. But so they would take these canoes to Palau, and because they didn't have metal, they would take a giant clamshell and break it at the scallops and make axes out of it to quarry these rocks. And they call it stone money, but they're actually made out of calcite, which is a crystal.
Yeah.
So they're very fragile. And then they'd take them back to the island, and they would trade. Like you could trade it for, wives, canoes, cattle, whatever.
Jeez.
It was used as money.
Yeah.
And sometimes people would die. It was a very perilous journey. And they would value the stones based on how perilous the journey was, whatever.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and there's even one documented case where one of these stones fell off into the water when they were unloading it off the dock, and they still knew it was there, so it still traded hands. And the small,
It's kind of like a offshore account.
Yeah, offshore account basically. But the small ones would actually physically trade hands. One like the one that the Bank of Canada has, that's a couple metric tons. It never moved. It would be just in front of a building or something. And no, Bob owns that now, and everyone's, oh yeah, that's Bob's. That's Bob's stone. So occasionally these things come on the market,
Yeah.
and you used to be able to export them off the island, and in the 70s they changed that. You can take them off the island if they're under 12 inches in diameter, but everyone wanted one of these things, and they were exporting them. So the government of Yap is like, no, after the 70s they couldn't take them off the island. But occasionally you'll run into some guy that during World War II was stationed on the island or was in the Coast Guard there shortly after, and they'll have them from when they were over there. They brought them back as souvenirs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You got to keep an eye out for that because we see a lot of stuff like that. These
Oh,
old
and you
guys,
look at it, it's like a giant
especially
rock.
the World War II guys. They've got stuff from all over. You're right, exactly.
Yeah.
The guys that were down in the South Pacific have stuff from there, and European guys.
The first time I bought one, it was a 175-pound stone, and I bought it off a guy that he brought it out in the Bombay of a plane. Yeah. He had pictures of him loading it up on the plane and everything, like in the 50s, and I was like, that is just, it's too cool.
Can you imagine playing poker with those? Well, how big's your table got to be? That's interesting.
Yeah, they come in all sizes, and it's the world's largest currency.
No kidding.
What else have you bought lately or sold that was interestingly weird?
Interestingly weird. That's a good question. I mean, I find myself kind of drawn to that kind of stuff. Like Swedish plate money, do you know what that is?
No.
In Sweden during the late 1600s, early 1700s, they made these coins out of copper that's called plate money. And what happens is, Sweden has these huge copper deposits there, so they're pulling all this copper out of the ground, and they were usually exporting it and then importing silver and gold to make coins with. So when they were at war with their neighbors and nobody wanted to trade with them, all they had was copper. So they rolled copper into these giant sheets and then cut them into coins that are, some of them weigh as much as 4 pounds, 8 pounds, depending on what denomination they are.
Yeah.
And they had all of the intrinsic value of the copper. Like, can you imagine if you had $1 worth of copper?
Yeah.
Instead of you've got 100 large cents back in the 1800s. Yeah. Well, think about if it was a $10, right?
Yeah.
And then one coin out of a giant. Yeah, there are these giant plates of copper that up until some of the world mints started kind of playing games and being like, oh, well, we're going to strike the biggest coin. No, we're going to strike the biggest coin. These were in the Guinness Book of World Records as the largest coins ever struck, and up until recent times.
Wow.
And they're certainly the largest coins ever struck that circulated. So
circulated.
Yeah, they actually circulated as money, whereas
carrying your frisbees around.
Yeah, well, there's
Exactly,
a museum in Sweden where they have this statue, and it shows. I mean, because you couldn't carry if you had a whole bunch of these. People would take them in carts or tie them to a leather strap, and you're hauling them on your back because it's such a massive amount of weight.
Yeah, it is. Copper to boot.
Yeah, copper.
Yeah, it's easy to work with.
Yeah, it's easy to work with, and I actually bought one once that was from a Swedish siege, kind of digressing back to an earlier conversation, but they didn't have money to pay the troops, so they made it out of melted down cannons. And it's a much, much cruder looking plate than the copper ones because, cannons are a bronze alloy and different melting point and much, much less malleable. So very interesting.
Interesting. It seems that the spectrum of coins, it's amazingly huge. I don't know even the word to use to it. There's just so many different areas you can get into, and to be able to talk to guys like you, both of you that just know so much about all this stuff is just really neat. Thanks for coming by. I really appreciate it. We were talking about biblical coins.
Yeah, because Christmas is around the corner.
Christmas is around the corner. And it's amazing that a lot of these coins are readily available at a reasonable price. You can actually own a coin. I get guys that buy Morgan dollars that think, well, Wyatt Earp might have held this dollar.
Oh, sure.
Well, there's coins that out there that theoretically Jesus might have traded in them.
Yeah, not traded them, but possibly handled.
Handled them, yeah.
There's a few that come to mind that are specifically mentioned in the Bible, and one being the tribute penny, which is that coin is a denarius of Tiberius, the Emperor Tiberius, and I think the passage goes something along the lines of render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's and render unto God's what is God's. It's Jesus holding the coin, referring to like the coin has a portrait of the emperor on it. Another one that you can actually find on the market is a shekel of Tyre, it's a coin that would have been struck in Phoenicia, which is modern-day Lebanon, towards the south in the city of Tyre. That's the type of coin that historians believe was the one of the 30 pieces of silver that Judas was paid when he betrayed Jesus. And then, of course, after he realizes what he's done, he takes the bag, throws it in the temple, and goes and hangs himself. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a little bit of...
And then the other one that actually is probably the most available and the least expensive is the widow's mite, which is a Jewish pruta. And that's the coin where Jesus is in the temple and sees somebody dump a bunch of money into the offering basket, and one of the apostles says, I bet I'll bet that guy gets a good place in heaven. And then the widow who has no money dumps in a few little copper coins, and Jesus goes, I think she'll get a better place because that's all the money she has. But yeah, you can own this, and it's history,
It's amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
Inexpensive too. It's amazing to me, considering how long a time period we're talking about, and the fact that they're copper.
Yeah, like those widow's mites. I bought a group of them at the Long Beach show, and they were incredibly cheap. Like, you could buy those for a really nice one for under $20.
Under 20?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless the ones that bring more is like if you had one that's of Pontius Pilate, because that's the guy who was prefect.
Yeah.
Like, people will pay more for that, but like just a common widow's mite, like $20.
Yeah, interesting. Well, if you guys are interested in widow's mites or anything world, give the boys over at World Numismatics a call at
480-921-2562 or on our website at worldnumismatics.com.
Or if you're trying to reach anybody that knows anything about U.S. coins, we know an awful lot. You can reach us at 800-221-7694 or AmericanFederal.com.